Hello and welcome to another video from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. Just to clarify once again, Joe is on his holidays, and for those of you who are equally shocked, so is my beard because I'm doing November. So don't worry, the Fantasy Football Scout channel has not been hijacked by a 12-year-old. Or maybe it has this whole time and you just didn't know. But yeah, that's just to explain why I look very different today. But yes, it's Friday. It's Friday afternoon. It means only one thing. It's time for some team news. And unfortunately for Neil, who's a busy man on a Friday anyway, we only had 6 press conferences on the Thursday, which I believe, Neil, means we had 14 press conferences for you today. Absolute marathon of a session for you today. But I understand that you still have managed to maintain your sanity, which is always good.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we don't get some press conferences on Europa League nights. We have to make do with what we've heard on the Thursday evening. But today we have had a full complement of 14 to go with the 6 we heard yesterday. So we'll rattle through them all now.
Yep, that's the aim. We'll do this as quickly as we can. As I said, loads to get through. Let's start where we always tend to, with Manchester City. There wasn't too many sort of injury doubts in the air, but as ever, everyone's just wondering which of the Man City players are going to play against Southampton. It's a big potential score for a lot of these players. Is there anything that can particularly indicate one way or the other that one person is going to play, isn't going to play? Obviously, Sterling looks quite likely, but yeah, what's the word from Guardiola?
Limited use he was, as usual. I guess the biggest pointer can be the team selection on, was it Tuesday night in the EFL Cup? So he rested certain players then, and he even nodded to that this morning or this afternoon in his press conference when he was asked about prioritising certain competitions. So this was off the back of Jurgen Klopp's comments about Liverpool's fixture clash in December with their participation in the Club World Cup. But he was saying that, there are certain competitions that you do prioritise. He said that he didn't play Gundogan, he didn't play Kevin De Bruyne, didn't play David Silva in midweek because of that. So nice to hear those names if you're owner of any of them, De Bruyne and Silva especially. So the likes of Sterling, Mendy weren't involved on the EFL Cup. Same with Stones as well. So you would hope that is a signal for them to start this weekend. It doesn't always work that way in Pep's world. And of course, we've seen both Aguero and Gabriel Jesus start in midweek as well, which wasn't a great help to us. But yeah, in terms of actual comments from today, not a great deal. In terms of the fitness news, nothing much new. So everyone who was fit before is fit, according to Guardiola, although he still has some training to take this afternoon. The guys who were injured are still injured, according to him. So that would be the long-term ones like Sane, Rodri as well, who's expected back after the other side of the national break, Zinchenko. He said Angelino's was just cramp, but pretty much as we were last weekend in terms of injury news, and we're at the mercy of Guardiola's rotation this weekend as to who's going to line up. We can have a stab at it based on the midweek lineup, but who the hell knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think last week was the absolute proof in the pudding that we can do all the analysis we like.
Yeah.
Aguero was prime example. Had started every home game with which he was fit for since January on the bench because Guardiola just doesn't care. Or maybe Guardiola owns Jesus in FPL, you never know. What I thought was really funny about these quotes from Guardiola was they were so, oh, thanks for that, mate. So everyone I think is fit. I mean, that's fair enough, right? The guys who were injured are still injured. And the guys who are fit are fit. Oh, thanks. That's so informative. Thank you very much, Pep. That's him in a nutshell. And just on the Angelino thing, I mean, obviously, a lot of talk about Mendy this week. We've all sort of been saying, well, he looks nailed on because, I mean, Zinchenko obviously is long term, clearly, with the surgery he's had. Angelino went off injured midweek, and we obviously weren't too aware of the extent to which he was injured. We still think probably Mendy's going to start this game, especially with the the soft right-hand side that Southampton are going to offer, where Mendy can exploit that. But it is just worth highlighting, of course, that when we say that Mendy is nailed, maybe we can't say he's nailed on anymore just because Angelino isn't actually injured. It's just cramp. So
no, particularly when Cancelo's played at left back this season as well. He's occasionally deputised on that side. So feasibly, you could play Walker and Cancelo at full back and then bench Mendy. But I would expect Mendy to play, providing there's no fitness setback.
Yeah. I think we can all expect that. Let's move on to Liverpool then.
Hmm.
Different sort of issues here. I mean, we're never really worried about rotation too much. It's really been about the injuries recently. Obviously, Salah's had a yellow flag in the last few days.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about Matip and his latest. Matip, quite a big part of that defence this year. Some would argue that he's more integral to that defence than Alisson. So, some big things to discuss. What has Klopp told us about?
Yeah, on Matip, he's going to be out for a little while. Klopp said a few weeks, and then when pressed on the issue, said a few weeks is more than 3. So could be maybe December we're looking at, or certainly the back end of November before he returns. So I would expect Lovren to play because Gomez played 90 minutes on Wednesday night. Part of a defence had conceded 5 against Arsenal. And Lovren has deputised in the 3 most recent Premier League and Champions League games where Matip hasn't played. So I think we can probably expect him to line up alongside Van Dijk, who had a dead leg and was yellow flagged. But Klopp said after the game that he's going to be fine. And then in midweek ahead of the Arsenal game, I think the injury roundup said that there was no other injury news. So we're assuming that he's fit. So the front 3, the back 4 all got rested in midweek. We might see, a change in the centre of the park because Fabinho, it was not a well-owned fantasy asset, but he's, I guess, integral to how they defend as the anchor of the midfield 3. Now, Klopp was slightly hinting that he might rest him tomorrow because he's on 4 yellow cards. And who do we play next week? It's Manchester City in the league. So if Fabinho picks up a 5th booking tomorrow, he'll miss that Man City game. So Klopp didn't say for definite that he'd rest him. He said that either the player will have to deal with it on the pitch or I will have to deal with it in the lineup. And he said that it's not possible to play against Aston Villa without making any challenges. So, yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw a Wijnaldum or a Henderson move back into that number 6 role and then someone like Oxlade-Chamberlain brought in if he's got one eye on protecting Fabinho for Man City. But in terms of the rest of the team news, pretty good omens in terms of the wider owned fantasy assets like Salah and Mane, because there's been nothing reported as yet. And Klopp's assistant, who's called Pep, in midweek said that Salah was fine. So that's why the flag has come off of Salah in FPL.
That's good news indeed. Yeah, I mean, I think largely we can be quite positive about those comments, which is great. Let's move on to Chelsea now, who increasingly are becoming a team that we need to pay attention to on a Friday. Obviously, Man City and Liverpool, we're always on tenterhooks with them, but Lampard increasingly becoming someone that we really need to pay attention to because, well, I mean, there's injuries we've got to consider. For example, Kante's been out, Rudiger's been out, which obviously has potential impact on some of the defensive assets. But of course, in the last couple of days, Christian Pulisic, Captain America, has assembled out of nowhere and is all of a sudden threatening potentially Hudson-Odoi, Willian, or just for a lot of people, not too sure what the situation is at Chelsea. So yeah, let us know what the latest is on the injury front. But has Lampard been discussing anything about rotation or any favourites in that attacking midfield trio that tends to sit behind Tammy Abraham?
He has, yeah. He's generally one of the more helpful managers, Lampard. Occasionally doesn't give us concrete news, but he said this afternoon that much like City, their injured players are still injured. So Rudiger's not going to be ready. Kante, Bartley and Christensen are all close, but it looks like they're not going to feature this weekend. So he says there's a difference between being fit and being match fit. He doesn't like to rush these players straight back in. So it looks like Ajax next week in the Champions League, that's when those 3 will be ready. As for rotation, so we've seen a lot of people jump on Hudson-Odoi after his form since his return from injury. And of course, Pulisic unexpectedly promoted to the starting 11 last week, scores a hat-trick. And predictably, Lampard was asked about his selection headaches out wide. And he says, yeah, he's got real problems because he's got not just those 2, but Pedro and Willian as well. It's good to have that competition because it keeps him on their toes, he says. And he did say that it wasn't necessarily true that he would continue to rotate them. So we've seen the likes of Mount and Abraham get a real string of starts, only missing AFL Cup matches, playing in both the Premier League and the Champions League. And he said that he's not here to rotate for the sake of it. He says he understands players that want momentum and want to play when there's no pressure that if you have one game below par, then you're dropped. So, yeah, I don't know if that was a point towards Pulisic starting again, maybe this week. The fact that he isn't going to chop and change regularly, according to him. Pulisic was withdrawn as well in midweek on the 70-minute mark, whereas Hudson-Odoi played the full 90. So if you're looking at minutes in midweek, maybe that's a slight indication. But yeah, that'll be the real selection dilemma for not just him, but for fantasy managers as well this weekend. I think that left-hand side, whether it's going to be Pulisic or Hudson-Odoi, we wouldn't like to make a definitive call either way, but maybe he was pointing us in the direction of Pulisic with his comments today.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, and I mean, for me, I just look at it and think, well, I mean, so a lot of us have Mason Mount, for example, and to me, this kind of just really screams of just hold on to him. If you were thinking about chopping and changing what your Chelsea coverage was, then this exact sort of thing is why I think just stick with someone who. Because the thing with Mount is he can play anywhere in the midfield. He can play number 10, he can play on the wings, he can play in the deeper two, and he's taking the set pieces. So he's very nailed in a lot of areas there. Whereas, Hudson-Odoi really can only play on the left. Pulisic obviously is kind of versatile again. It sounds like Willian's probably favoured on the right. Interesting, obviously, of course, to look at those minutes from midweek. I was talking to Gianni, who's a Chelsea fan who I did the FPL show with last night, who was saying that in his opinion, the reason that Pulisic was substituted was not actually necessarily to prep him for game week 11. It was actually because he had got a poor game and Hudson-Odoi had a better one. So it's really hard, isn't it, to know exactly why these managers make this. We've learned that the hard way with Pep, that it's not just about rest. Sometimes it's about performance as well. So there's so much up in the air with these guys, backed up, of course, by the fact that even Lampard is admitting that, he's not too sure what he's going to do. That should be sounding the alarm bells in the heads of fantasy managers, as far as I'm concerned, I think. Let's move on to Manchester United then. Alarm bells have been kind of ringing in fantasy managers' head for these for slightly different reasons. Not so much to do with rotation, perhaps more to do with form. But obviously, of course, there's a couple of flags to clear up as well. So what is the latest from Old Trafford?
Yeah, so again, a lot of the players who were flagged before aren't going to be back. I'm talking in terms of the longer term ones. So Tuanzebe, Shaw, Matic, going to be the other side of the international break. Pogba, Solskjaer had ruled out previously until December, it looks like. We've also got Darlow as well, who was expected to miss out. Now, we had 3 new additions to the FPL injury list on Wednesday night. So Maguire, Lindelof and Rashford all picked up knocks in that win over Chelsea. And it's those 3 really who will be of the main concern to fantasy managers. So Solskjaer said that it's still early. They're hopeful of getting them on the pitch tomorrow. Doesn't sound serious in any cases. They've had some treatment already and taking part in a light training session. So fairly positive noises coming from Solskjaer. You never truly know with him. He's fast developing a reputation of becoming a Guardiola or a Howe type, having been very, very helpful in his early days at Old Trafford. But yeah, you're never entirely sure with him. He's ruled players out previously before and then they've miraculously recovered. But it sounds fairly positive. I thought they were all knocks rather than anything muscular. And he says he's hopeful on them being involved against who are they playing? Bournemouth in the early kickoff. I should just say, actually, somebody might notice this morning when I put this on Twitter. There's forecast tomorrow for 70 mile an hour winds at Bournemouth around about midday, which is when it kicks off. So, that'll be an interesting spectacle, I think, if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, both of those teams, Bournemouth especially, there's been hardly any goals in their recent games. Maybe we need a bit of wind to come along and blow the ball in the net for some Callum Wilson owners, perhaps. Maybe that's what we need. A bit of divine intervention. Let's move on to sort of everybody else now. I mean, there's loads to go through. I mean, I've stuck a few quotes up on the screen. One from Dean Smith on Jack Grealish. Daniel Farker's been talking about Todd Cantwell. So there's a few bits and bobs to clear up. So I mean, maybe start with those 2 that we've got on the screen, and then reel us through everybody else. Through all the notes that you've been garnering throughout the day.
Sure, yeah. I'm sure there'll be more coming out as well this afternoon that I haven't fully seen yet. In which case, I'll have a roundup at 5:00 on the site. Grealish again, fairly positive sounding. Smith said that it was just a kick to the calf, so a little bleed there. Nothing that's going to be developing a long-term problem, hopefully. Grealish himself wants to play. He's hopeful of playing. But Smith does sort of sound a bit of caution, saying that he's going to make a decision on whether he's going to be fit enough to start, given that they're playing the reigning European champions and league leaders. So he's been out training today. He's still a little bit sore, but they're going to make a late call on him. But it's not serious, and if he's not back for this weekend, or if he's not starting this weekend, then he shouldn't be long term. Norwich, Daniel Farke is getting bodies back, but losing a few at the same time. So Krul and Farman, who are two of the keepers. Krul, who had a relative blinder really last week against Man United, saving 2 penalties. Could have been a lot worse if it had not been for him. They're available. The fresh doubts over Amadou, who picked up a knock and was really struggling towards the end of that game. And Todd Cantwell, who was already hemorrhaging owners. He has a slight doubt with a hamstring problem, so they're going to make a late assessment on him. They've also got a couple of doubts, not because of injury, but because of partners giving birth. So Kenny McLean and O'Neill Hernandez, who is Cantwell's direct positional rival, I think they're both attending their partners' births this week or close to the game. So I think there's slight doubts. They won't be travelling with the team to Brighton, but they're hopeful that they'll be able to make their own way there in terms of, private chartered plane or something like that. So there'll be slight doubts over those two as well. But Norwich a lot better, and I think they're looking at getting Zimmerman and Hanley back after the international break as well.
Yeah, those two defenders coming back will be big for them. I think Zimmerman especially, big player for them last season. Obviously some good updates on Norwich. Cantwell owners. I'm one of them. I think I remember, what was it, game week 3 or 4, and I said he can be a fourth midfielder, and I think Joe has in the long term been proven right to suggest he perhaps is just a fifth midfielder, because when you see that sort of thing, you can't really move him onto anyone else. So it's just a benching really. Although obviously the interesting thing will be is who he does play on the left of that attacking midfield 3, because when I saw that Cantwell was a doubt, I thought, Hernandez, it just makes sense for him to start. Of course, he scored the goal against Man United, but then if he's not going to be around either, with good reason, of course, then you never know. Maybe Cantwell has to play because he doesn't have anyone else who can play in that position. So yeah, lots up in the air there. Let's just go back to the full list of conferences that we've had from today. There's absolutely loads of them. Any other key lines to come out? I haven't got any more quotes to put on the screen, but by all means, read out a few if you need to. So yeah, lots.
I'll just run through. I'll do like an A to Z rather than prioritising anything. Arsenal's was predictably dominated by Granit Xhaka after his antics last week. So Emery, interestingly, has said that he is not on his mind for tomorrow. So it does sound like he's not going to play, which I think is probably a sensible move, given that it's a home game and there'd be a lot of focus on Xhaka and his, not just his performances, but how his attitude is. So it sounds like he's going to miss out. I haven't heard anything more on the injury front from Arsenal. Özil, of course, played in midweek, and Emery again asked about him, whether he's going to play, as you'd expect, non-committal, saying that he was using his maximum squad quota for that League Cup game, which maybe is pointless in the direction that he's not going to start. Elsewhere, let me just go down the list. Some of these will be from yesterday as well. Excuse me. I got flu, by the way, in case you're wondering. Bournemouth, Dan Gosden's back. He's very close to return. He's been out with a hip problem for several months. Other than that, pretty much as we were. Brooks is still not quite ready. Howe did say they've got a couple of other little niggles, which is very unhelpful because he didn't name names. So we'll have to be primed for a surprise omission on the team sheet on Saturday. Brighton, again, same as really. Bernardo and Izquierdo, longer-term absences, still unavailable. Aaron Moyes back from suspension. Now, Potter was asked about Trossard, who came back last week against Everton as a substitute. Changed the game in a way. He had a big impact, and he was asked yesterday about whether he's fit to start, but did point to the fact that he'd only had less than half an hour football since the end of August. So he still had to be handled carefully, and that how much time he's played so far has to be a consideration. So I wonder whether he was maybe pointing us in the direction of a impact substitute role again. Remains to be seen. You're never entirely sure with Potter. But yeah, that's probably the headline news from there. Burnley, Chris Wood, still a doubt. Remains touch and go according to Dyche. He's got a hamstring problem. Bardsley's a fresh out. He probably wouldn't have played anyway. He's a backup right back. Goodmanson's still out. Palace, apparently Guaita is trained all this week, so he might come back into a contention. He's been unavailable for the last two. Andros Townsend's a major doubt. Hutchin says he's going to be surprised if he's fit for the Leicester game, despite the fact that he's returned to training. He's got this muscle problem that he picked up against Arsenal, so it sounds like he's going to be unavailable. Everton, Silva hasn't quite ruled out Yerry Mina yet. He limped off in midweek. Gababian and Bernard are still sidelined. Bernard came off early with I think it was a knee injury last weekend. But Mina's trained, and they're going to make a late call on him. He's got this recurring issue in his knee, but it's nothing serious beyond a bit of discomfort and pain. Leicester, clean bill of health, which sounds good, apart from a long-term absentee, Matty James. Newcastle, Sean Lockstaff's banned, but Isaac Hayden returns, so you'd expect him to come back in the central midfield. Richie and Fabian Schär are still not quite there yet. Lejeune's going to be playing for the under-23s again before he's considered for a first-team return. But there is the welcome return of Andy Carroll, who's back for now from a groin problem. So he's going to be in the squad.
For this week.
Before he picks up something else. Sheffield United, much like Eddie Howe's comments, really, while they're hinting that there was a couple of problems, didn't name names, unfortunately, so we don't know who they are. He said they're going to be given as much time as possible to recover before the Burnley game, but didn't elaborate on that. He was asked about Lys Mousset, who was benched against West Ham last weekend, came on and scored. He said if he'd had a full week to recover after the Arsenal game, then he might have started him. He'd been very, very tempted to do that. Now, he has had a full week to recover before this game, so he might be back in the starting 11. He's very much the man in form up front. Southampton, Bertrand suspended, of course, after that red card against Leicester. Gineppo and Cedric are very nearly available, but not quite ready for this weekend. There was some interesting comments actually from Hasenhüttl about how they're going to approach the Man City game, because I know people will be backing the likes of Sterling, De Bruyne, Maguire for the captaincy. And Hasenhüttl said that they were going to be nasty again as possible. He did point to the fact that they're usually a high pressing team. They play with this high defensive line, but that isn't possible against City because they just, they're not really bothered by high press. They can just pass around you. So I think we'll see a deep lying defensive line as we saw in the League Cup game on Tuesday night. So that is, I don't think it's going to be as open as it was against Leicester, unfortunately. Spurs, Lamella's out. He's got a hamstring problem, I think, or is it a thigh problem? But he's sidelined. Vertonghen's the one with the hamstring problem. He's going to be assessed. Danny Rose is suspended. So we could see, and we'll expect Ben Davies to start, but we might see Ryan Sessegnon on the bench for the very first time. Watford, Welbeck remains out. He's a long-term one. Deeney's nearing a return, but probably going to be the other side of the national break. We've got some fresh additions to that. Cleverly, got a heel problem. Domingos Squina, he's got a groin injury. Ismail Assar's got a leg injury. They're all out. Kapui is 50-50, I think. He's got a back problem. He's only been partly training this week, so it sounds very much a doubt as well. Success has recovered. He's fit, and Holloway is back from suspension. West Ham, Wilshere looks set to remain out as well. Got a groin problem, and Pellegrini said it would be a risk for him to play. Antony and Fabianski still out, and Winston Reid's still building up match fitness with under 23s. And I think that leaves us with Wolves, who I've just seen. Gibbs White was already flagged. I think he's a slight doubt. And Willie Bolly's obviously a longer-term injury. Now, added to that is Ryan Bennett, who I think missed out last weekend. He did against Arsenal. Came back in midweek against Aston Villa, but has since suffered a recurrence of his groin problem. So Santos ruled him out. So that right-sided centre-back spot is probably going to be filled by one of Doherty or Dendoncker again, as it was last weekend against Arsenal. Because we've seen Vallejo is not really cut it yet at Premier League level. Yeah. So, could be Doherty playing at centre-back again or Dendoncker to cover for those absentees at the back.
Yeah, certainly some really frustrating developments for Wolves at the back. which is a shame because a lot of people had moved on to their defensive assets. Some of them even gone to Bolly, the one who's broken his ankle. So yeah, be interesting to see what happens to people who had perhaps maybe moved on Aubameyang for this game, because he could actually quite enjoy his match against Wolves. Thank you very much for that update there, Neil. Lots to go through. Do appreciate there's loads to squeeze in on a Friday. It was a few press conferences on a Thursday, but not really enough to justify a video because they're usually the ones we clear up rather than do 20 minutes on. So yeah, that's about all the time that we've got. As ever, when we do these videos, worth pointing out just to keep an eye on our Twitter and our website on the predicted lineup section on the team news tab at the top, because there's always a few things that just sort of tickles out in the afternoon. And of course, some things are often embargoed until 10:30 on a Friday. Usually the really scary stuff, the stuff that implies that Aguero is not going to play, that sort of thing. So keep an eye out then as well. Obviously, we've got pretty much all of our content is raring and ready to go for Game Week 11. So I've seen a few people in the chat asking about who to captain. Well, we've done a video on that earlier this week, so head back to the list of videos on our YouTube channel and you should find that, as well as the Scoutcast where we discuss that too, and Captain Sensible, the article where we go through all the data to work out who is the best captain. That's on the website too. Scout Squad is up as well, so if you want to know who we think are the best players to own, go and check that out. At 6:30 we will have the Scout Picks 11, which is the best 11 players chosen from that. Just a little word, because Joe's not around and just for various things, we aren't able to do a Breakfast Club tomorrow. I'm sure it will be missed. It usually is when we don't have one, which is great news. It's always good to know that when we don't do a video, people have missed it. So apologies for that. It will come back the following week. And of course, if you've enjoyed any of the stats that you've seen, we don't really use them too much in this video, but we have in a lot of our other ones and on our Twitter and on our website, then you can always sign up to Fantasy Football Scout membership to get full access to that. The link on how to do that is in the description below. That just leaves me to say good luck to everyone for Game Week 11, and thanks again to Neil for all those updates.
Cheers, David. See you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.